So are you a squad leader now that you got promoted?
I finished, right before I left Virginia. Like the platoon is disbanding, so I get promoted to the squad leader billet before I leave. So I'm holding that billet for a couple months, which that just elevates me from in charge of 4 to in charge of 12. Now I'm in charge of 3 teams. So trying to figure that out. And then when I arrive on the island of Hawaii, I'm part of 2-3 now. I immediately get thrown into a squad leader position.
That's awesome.
So that was fun. Hawaii was.
Now, are they looking at you like, oh, dude, you came from fast company, you don't know what it's like down here on the front lines with the grunts? Or is it like, oh, this guy came from fast company, he's got some experience? Like, what's their attitude?
My team was still deployed. They were, I think, in Okinawa at the time. And so when I immediately landed, I immediately went to school. So I went to the Advanced Infantry Course, which is our, infantry course, leadership course. The first leadership course I ever went to was like 3 years in, after I already had all these iterations of leading. So I immediately go to this new school, which gave me a leg up. And after
Where was that school?
It was in Hawaii. So
And how was it?
It was pretty brutal.
How long is it?
It's like 2 or 3 months. And it's all field work. So you get to operate as a platoon sergeant, you get to operate as a platoon commander, you're writing, mission orders, you're doing offense, defense, you're doing urban, and you're in charge. You're the platoon commander running that whole thing, which was really cool. It gave me a lot of perspective on what officers deal with that whole, because I sit there, I'm like, oh, Jocko's writing an order, like that should be pretty easy. But when you got to write an order on a weekend and it freaking sucks, and you got to handwrite it, you don't get to type it, you have to handwrite 2 copies. It gives you a lot of perspective on what's going on. So I learned a lot there. It was a very tough and grueling school. A lot of people, they self-select out, or they just don't get along with the instructors, because majority of us are NCOs and there's sergeants and staff sergeants leading us, and there's just a lot of headbutting going on. But it was fun. Most physical school I've been to. The only
just humping?
Yeah, they got some hills out in on Oahu. There's this route we take called the Devil's Backbone, which is probably the hardest physical thing I've ever done. And we're hiking, 100-pound packs. It's like 12 miles uphill both ways somehow. They're gassing us while we're out there. Like, it just sucks. It was the only time I've ever, not stayed with the instructor from a PT standpoint. It was intense, but it was fun. I loved it. I loved being able to be in those roles. And I think when I was in that school, I was in charge of 2 different iterations. I was in charge of a defense, which I failed that iteration. Because you learn how you have to lean on other people, because I may be the platoon sergeant, platoon commander, but I have to appoint a nav man and a guy that's built a terrain model and all these different pieces. And, you can do great, but the team could fail. And guess what? You're still going to fail. So I failed the defense. I put us on a elevated piece of terrain, but basically in rock. And so the guys could not dig in, and we got attacked, and we did not do well. And so
once you got out, did you select the terrain while you were out there? Or did you select the terrain prior to getting out to the location?
It's basically en route.
So en route, but once you got there, you're like, all right, there's rocks here, we should move.
It was probably like once I got like 2 feet down, then we started to hit that bedrock, and then it was like, it's too late.
Oh, it's too late.
Dark's coming, like we're already here, like figure it out.
And then do you get attacked?
Yeah.
And what are they using, miles gear or paintball?
No, at that point we're still using blanks,
but with no laser indicators or anything?
Nope.
But so it's just the instructors are kind of judging.
Yeah. And you get eval'd, you get peer eval'd on what's going on. And so I failed that iteration, which was humbling for me, because I never really failed anything in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. I was always elevated, even from boot camp to number 1. And every place I went, I was like the first person promoted or in charge. And so it was very humbling for me, because I thought I did great. And then I failed. And if you fail twice on anything, whether it's when you're in charge of platoon or, assembling any piece of gear or calling for bombs and stuff, like if you fail twice on anything, you get dropped from the course. Damn. And so I failed that.
How early was that in the course?
That was probably about halfway through. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I was going to get another chance, but I didn't know what I was going to get. And luckily I got, urban. So I got to plan an attack on a city, which coming from fast company, that gave me a leg up. Because in the traditional infantry, you don't get that training. I went through, we call it AUC, CQB, Advanced Urban Combat, down in Norfolk. And that was 3 months where I learned how to clear buildings, and there's some high-speed stuff out there. When we went to Israel, which was probably the greatest mountain town I've ever been to, was a gigantic city. So I had a lot of experience in urban combat from a training standpoint. So I had a leg up there, and I crushed that second iteration being in charge just because I had that experience in place.
How long is that whole school?
It's probably like 2.5, 3 months.
And now you feel pretty good getting out of that thing. I mean, that sounds like awesome training.
That was probably the best training I went through from a learning perspective.
And now your battalion 2-3, they were on deployment and now they're coming back.
They're coming back. People are leaving. People are getting out, and then I get transitioned to a platoon.
And you're ready to rock and roll.
I'm ready. I've been waiting because not only do I go to AUC, but I go through our water survival course, which is, I think, the more challenging course from a attrition rate in the Marine Corps. It's called McQuiss, Marine Corps Instructor of Water Survival. I think 100 people tried out. We had 30. We graduated with 8.
Damn.
It's just 3 months of swimming, which I'm not really a good swimmer. I just too dumb to quit is what ended up happening. Plus I'm in Hawaii, so the water's not that cold. So I went through all this schooling, which was great, which gave me a leg up. And after I got to platoon, it really kind of got welcomed with open arms, just because I had this experience. The fast guys that came in before had a good reputation. Some of the other security forces that were at the nuke bases, they didn't have that good reputation, and they didn't get the training that we got to. So we were kind of seen as these assets that we could utilize. Mm-hmm. So that was nice for me.
And then are you starting a workup basically when they show up? Boom.
Yep. So they show up, and then you're going on that 9-month workup before you deploy again.
And how's the workup?
Workup's good. So in Hawaii, you go to the Big Island to train. We call it, I think it's Island Viper. It actually gets pretty cold out there. You're working on lava rock, which is its own freaking beast to try to deal with and move on that terrain. You go down to Pendleton to get certified down there, you go down to 29 Palms to get certified, which is very similar to the FTXs that we always talk about. That's the culmination. The names have changed over the years, but after your workup, you go down to 29 Palms to make sure that you can deploy. So they have these cadre down there called Coyotes, and whether it's called ITX or CAX, they've changed it over the years. For about a month and a half, you're getting certified by the Marine Corps to make sure you can deploy. And that was really the first test as a unit on hey, are you guys good to go? Which we're being told we're going to Okinawa, which the guys aren't really thrilled about that. You have a bunch of guys that signed up for 4-year contracts, and in a 4-year contract as an 03, you only get 1 deployment. You get 2 if you're lucky. So these guys is 1 deployment. They're going to Okinawa. So that was tough to deal with just because it's not the mission that they wanted. So keeping them on task or trying to motivate them when they're going to do something they don't want to do, or they see all these other teams that are still over in Afghanistan and stuff like that. It was tricky to navigate, but that final iteration was pretty cool to see the team come together and work as a cohesive unit. And you're doing platoon and company and battalion size, operations, which was really cool. And eventually we get certified before we head over to Okinawa.
Any major challenges during that?
I think in that space, one of the constant themes throughout the Marine Corps has been, people wanting to take their lives. In boot camp, we had a guy try to commit suicide. In SOI, we probably had several guys try to commit suicide. And there's this really negative mindset in the military towards guys that try to commit suicide. It's a coward's way out, or why didn't they ask for help? And I remember being young, and when people don't succeed at taking their life, they get put on suicide watch. I'm sure you know what suicide watch is. You get Echo tries to commit suicide, and so at night there's gonna be 4 people that watch you. And I don't get to sleep now. I just have to watch you, which frustrates me a little bit. So they have this negative mindset towards this. And so this continues to happen throughout my time in the Marine Corps. Is guys just consistently try to commit suicide for whatever rhyme or reason. And one of the lessons I learned out at 2-3 was, the power of relationships in itself. I had this Marine that was in our company that was, doing the wrong thing. He popped on a drug test, and I basically was one of the guys that got tasked with, getting him back to the speed. As you pop on a drug test, you're getting kicked out of the military. But I spent a lot of time with him. He got put on restriction, which means you can't leave base, you can't change out of uniform. It's your life sucks. And I spent a lot of time with this Marine, but I don't really, for lack of a better phrase, don't really care about what's going on. It's taken away from my team. Why would I prioritize this person when he wants to get out? He doesn't want to be with us. And, fast forward a little bit, this guy tries to commit suicide. And this one I was relatively a part of, to where we're looking for him. We can't find him. He's in the barracks. We break down the door, and he, tried to hang himself. And the team got there just in the sake of time to cut him down and resuscitate him on scene. And I remember after the fact, obviously there's an investigation on what's going on from the head shed, and a lot of questions are getting asked on, who was with this person at this time, or who spent time with this person here. And a lot of fingers indirectly pointed toward me and the time I spent with him. And I started to think on the role that I played in the situation on, I potentially could have helped this person not make this decision by simply being there for him. And I really undervalued relationships, specifically in the Marine Corps, because I couldn't wrap my mind around, I'm going to be with Jocko for 2 years. Like, why should I spend time with him when he's going to get out? He's going to move on. Like, there's somebody else out there. Or there's more people that are higher priority. And so that really was a harsh reality for me on, like, you have to take time to know the team. You have to get to know them, not just on a professional level, but a personal level. Like things matter and what's happening at home and why he made that decision. I potentially could have uncovered that, saved him from making that decision. Because that mental health piece, as you know, in the veteran community, it's a real thing. There's this it's not a survey, but it's basically a graph on the amount of suicides in the last 20 years, the 20-year war, right? It's around 140,000 suicides in 20 years from the military. In that same 20 years, it's roughly like 6,600 that were killed in action. Like 6,600 versus 140,000. Like, that's the difference between killed in action and suicides. And, after that fact, I really told myself that, in life in general, whether it was in the military, when I got a family, or I joined a team, like, relationships was going to be the thing I focus on most in life. Because you never know when somebody's going to need your help. And if you don't have that relationship, they're not going to ask. So that was one of the biggest lessons in that 2-3 before we left.